Welcome everyone to your CathoLIT Ministry YouTube channel over here, Edwin Molina. Thank you so much for joining. Today we have a great guest. He's now a brother of mine, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But one of the crazy things about this guy is that he actually spoke to Trump on an arena somewhere where it was important, and they talked about something very important and dear to him because it had to do with a lot what happened to him while being in the service. So we have today John Frankman. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Edwin. Great to be here.
Yeah, for sure. And you've been around for a bit now. Can you tell us what actually got you into like this whole rhythm in between, social media, Catholicism, politics, and all that?
Yeah, so I wasn't planning on getting into social media and really having the spotlight, but I was a Special Forces Green Beret. And, first and foremost, I'm a Catholic and I wanted to serve my country and I wanted to glorify God in doing so. And I was able to do that in one of those elite units. However, with the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, choosing not to get it because of the aborted fetal cell piece, because of the unknowns medically, and because it was an illegal order, I was forced out of the military. And after being forced out of the military, I shared my story and I started advocating on behalf of other service members who were negatively impacted by the mandate.
Wow, that's a crazy story. We're gonna dig into that a little bit more. But before we start with all the juicy stuff, let's start with a paternoster, right? Just as we do always here, Catholic ministry. I know some people in the Anglo-Saxon arena. Just if you never see me. I'm Dominican, so I'm Hispanic. When we talk about ministry in English, it's always taken into kind of the clerical state. When we're talking about ministry from the Hispanic side, it's more like apostolate. Just so we get it clear out there, because I've heard so far a couple of tracks out there thinking like, oh, those people that have the under platform ministry and whatever, they don't even know what they're talking about. But I just give you my background. But anyway, without more shenanigans, let's go into the most beautiful prayer that our Lord Jesus Christ taught us, the Pater Noster. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Pater Noster, qui in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum. Abenet eiuntum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra.
Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis odie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen.
Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritus Sancto.
Sicut erat in principio, et nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
Amen. Glory be to our Lord Jesus Christ. Well, fam, I'm going to kick it off real quick over here with this video, and I want you to comment about it and let's dig into it, all right?
You leave? Did you leave? Did you ever take the vaccine or anything?
I never did, sir.
So you want a choice, yeah. And do you want it? Would you go back in if they were able to?
As long as there's accountability, potentially.
Yeah, no, there would be accountability, is right. They're going to will fire their asses.
I'm sorry, I laugh about that. It's the way that he says it's pretty funny. Now, so tell us real quick, because I'm like clueless. Where were you at the time? What was this event? And how do you got there? And so tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, short story is that after getting out of the military and having advocated so much, was able to build a lot of different relationships and had been on like 50 plus interviews, written some op-eds, been up to Congress a lot. And I got involved with Veterans for Trump. And in talking with Veterans for Trump, the person who ran it, she knew that this event was happening and was trying to get service members to ask Donald Trump questions. So I decided to fly up there, went to Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is near where I was stationed at Fort Bragg. They changed the name now just to be, more woke or whatever. It's supposedly Liberty, but went to Fort Bragg area and submitted my question. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to ask anything at all, but fortunately was able to sit up on stage and was able to ask Trump how he plans to repair the military and hold leaders accountable.
Got it. And do you expect what was going to be his answer to that or what?
I wasn't sure, but I was really happy with it. And I didn't know he was gonna ask me questions back, because his initial answer was that there should have never been a mandate. It was a huge mistake. He wants to bring people back in with back pay and an apology. And I kind of understood that. But then when he asked me, was I kicked out? Did I ever get the shot? And would I come back in? I'm really happy. And, you're nervous. There's thousands of people within the event. You're talking to the president of the United States. I told him, like, if there's accountability, I potentially would, but if there's not accountability, I won't come back. And that's speaking for thousands or tens of thousands of others who won't come back. So when he and Trump Passion said that he would fire their asses, I was extremely pleased. And, you know, what really hit me and struck me is when he was talking to me later on, saying that there should never been a mandate, but that people were treated terribly, terribly. Like, him saying that to me meant so much, because it made me think about how many other thousands of soldiers, service members were hurt by this thing. They were mistreated by their own leadership. I interviewed a Marine on Sunday and just met him after a church event. And he was talking about how he joined the military because he wanted to defend his country and defend the freedoms that this country stands for. But those freedoms that he was trying to defend were taken from him. And he was clearly hurt, clearly upset by it, as I am upset about my experience. But to know that the president understands those issues and wants to fix them and wants to make it right and is willing to fire people, that was just an absolutely amazing answer.
All right, fam, please subscribe, comment, give it a like, share this. I 100% agreed. I mean, it's just so crazy. How is it that so many men and women alike want to sacrifice their lives for the, you know, for the country and for all of us, you know, and then you get turned out just because you don't want to accept this COVID vaccine without any true evidence that it was safe, neither that it was gonna work. All right. So
Right.
that's just crazy. Now, you know, when I ever heard about you being a Green Beret, I'm like, what is that? Can you explain to us, the non-familiarized people, about the military? What is a Green Beret and all that?
So a Green Beret, and it's a beret is
Right.
so that's synonymous with special forces. So the Army has a few different special operations forces. One of them is Special Forces Green Berets, and Special Forces Green Berets are in an elite unit that masters special tactics. And what we mainly do is we work by, with, and through a partner force. So we are all regionally aligned. There's 5 special forces groups within the United States. We're regional aligned, where each group focuses on a different area of the world. So one focuses on Asia, another Europe, another Africa. The group I was in, which was 7th group, we focus on Central and South America. Thus, I had to learn Spanish within the military. And the 2 mission sets that we focus on are unconventional warfare and foreign internal defense. Unconventional warfare is using a partner force to try to overthrow a government, either an illegitimate government or an occupying force. And then foreign internal defense is when you're working with the government in order to drive out an insurgency, like we were trying to do in Iraq, Afghanistan, counterinsurgency operations. And it takes a couple of years of training to become a Green Beret. So first, you have to go through Special Forces assessment and selection. That is a 3-week tryout. And when I went, there was maybe 35% of the people who went actually made it. And that's after doing a PT test at first. And you have like a week where it's called Gate Week. You have to do ruck marches, runs, obstacle courses. You have to do combat physical assessments. We also had IQ tests. We had personality tests. We had to be tested in our capability of learning another language. Some of us had to see a psychologist, depending on how our kind of personality test went. Furthermore, after that week, then you go into land nav and you do land navigation for just 10 hours at a time, walking just miles and miles with a lot of weight on your back. And then finally, you have team week, where you are carrying more weight, further, heavier than you ever thought was possible. And I was being really well fed, pretty heavily fed there. I mean, they didn't restrict your calories, but I lost 20 pounds in a 3-week portion. I was having maybe 4 MREs a day, and that's maybe 8,000 calories a day.
Wow,
But I'm
that's
still
crazy.
losing I know. So I'm still losing 20 pounds just to, a lot of people don't necessarily understand how hard military training is sometimes. And in Ranger School, I remember regularly falling asleep while walking, being so tired that I am doing what's called droning. I remember regularly smelling ammonia coming off my body because
Wow.
I don't have the calories to process. I don't have the carbohydrates. My body is now burning up my muscle because that is how fatigued, how tired I am. And with the Special Forces, to become a Special Forces Green Beret, you do that 3-week selection. The last, day after doing all the team week is a 20+ mile ruck. They don't tell you how long it is, and you just go. And then it's like a year to 2 years of training after that, where you're learning small unit tactics. You're going through survival, evasion, resistance, escape school, which is SEER school, and they actually put you in a mock prison camp and try to accumulate you to what you might experience were you captured behind enemy lines. We have this exercise called Robin Sage, where we pretend that there is an invading force coming into the state and we need to help liberate this country. So we're working with guerrillas, living in the woods, living in a guerrilla base. And we have like a guerrilla chief, we have an area commander. We're talking to like a external government and trying to figure out how do we overthrow this enemy force that's occupying this country. So it's a lot. And then there's 6 months of language school. So there's a ton of money that gets put into every Special Forces Green Beret. And at the end of the course, I was able to go to military free fall, which is a 2 week course. No, sorry, three. Yeah, 2.5. So my course was a little short because I was there March of 2020 and they kind of shut us down because of COVID, but was able to get like 17 military free fall jumps in that school, including at nighttime with oxygen and equipment. So just a lot of really solid training going into every Green Beret. And we're just trying to be a combat multiplier by working by, with, and through that partner force in order to achieve America's ends.
Wow, man, that's crazy stuff that you just told me right now. And I would never even imagine about any of this. Now, you since day one to your last day, how long you served in the military?
So it's tricky to try to count because my military service was broken up between like college and then seminary. So originally I went to the military prep school, US Military Academy prep school from '06 to '07, think I wanted to go to West Point. So did that for a year, but then went to ROTC for college. So the way I commissioned was going to college at a normal university, Wheaton College, attending classes a couple times a week, summer training, and then commissioning. Now, after commissioning in 2011, I went straight to the seminary thinking that God was calling me to potentially be a priest. And then if that was the case, to be a chaplain. But as far as active duty time goes, after leaving the seminary, I started active duty in September of 2015 and finished in 2023. So I did about 8 years of active duty service from lieutenant to captain as an infantry officer and a special forces Green Beret officer.
Wow. All right. That's not a shot. I mean, you basically almost your entire life you've been around military work, right? I mean, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, my stepdad, he was military, and he came into my life, when I was a teen, and lived near a base there. And I mean, we were in DC. We were living right by DC on 9/11, and that was just such an experience to be able to see the smoke, to know the stepdad
Wow.
was up and around the Pentagon, and to just want to bring justice to these people and to defend the country.
Wow.
So the military is something that definitely is near and dear to my heart. That's why it's kind of bittersweet leaving under the circumstances that I have, but I do know that the work I'm doing is to try to better the military and to better the country. So I'm okay
Mhm.
with stepping out.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And have you ever, probably you did already thought about this, but I just want to ask you, um, what you think God allowed you, because at the end of the day, He allowed you to make those decisions of you getting involved with the military, end up being a Green Beret. I think I said it right now. I'm not sure.
We get better,
So,
yeah.
yeah. What do you think God allowed you to be where you are today?
I mean, His grace is amazing, and He writes our stories better than we ever can. And really, the toughest decision I think I ever made was to go into the seminary. And when I was thinking about it, I first had that thought. I converted to Catholicism when I was 15, and I was going through the process of becoming a Catholic. And there was a priest who was at the high school I was going to, a Catholic high school, and he said, "I'm up here as a priest. Maybe one day one of you will be here as a priest, also celebrating the sacraments." And I just had this kind of joy, but then I had this anxiety about not being married, about just changing up life plans. And it was kind of wrestling through that through college, really doing a lot of the discernment of spirits and having to die to myself, dying to the things that I thought God wanted me to do, but ultimately having some small openness to His will. So I think it's just, there's nothing other than like the Special Forces title. There's nothing special about me. I just am a person who's trying to be open to God's will, who's very imperfect. I have, many sins about me, which, have been open with you and others about. And I think that if you just open your life to what God wants to do with you, if you just allow yourself to be His imperfect instrument and try to subordinate your will to His, even if you do it imperfectly, He's going to work with that. So I think that He's been able to do many things in my life. I mean, I'm just astonished. I was able to convert to Catholicism, go to seminary, then become an infantry officer and ranger school, and then special forces Green Beret. And now, I just met Trump this month. I mean, it's insane, and I'm not the most eloquent person. I'm not the smartest person. Probably some people are tuning out of this podcast now because they're like, man, who's this guy? But it's just trying to open yourself up to God's will. I think he can do incredible things for you. And it doesn't need to look like anything spectacular, but within my case, I've just am very grateful and blessed, and I'm just trying to be a humble servant doing his will.
So what did you convert it from? Because you say you converted at 15 years old. So you were not a Catholic, or you're like a Protestant, or you
I was
got
a schismatic heretic. No, I'm just kidding. I was a Protestant. That's a joke,
you
Protestants.
got me
Calm
out
down.
real quick there. So
Calm down.
so you were a Protestant.
Yes.
And how was that process? Why you ended up like converting to the faith?
Yeah. So my parents, unfortunately, like a lot of people's parents, they split up when I was 6 and divorced when I was 9. And my parents, they had met at a Presbyterian church in California. And when I was living with my mom, which I did for the most part during the school year, we weren't taking to church on a consistent basis. It was tough for her, single mom, a few kids. So we maybe went about once a month or so. But for whatever reason, I was always blessed with the grace of knowing God exists and knowing that he loves me. So having that kind of nightly prayer with him, that's at least like, okay, God, I love you. Thank you, for everything you've done for me. And when I was in the summertime, though, I would live with my dad, and he would take me to church on a weekly basis. And moving around a lot as a kid, mostly just my mom moving for work and other things of that nature, I decided to live with my dad when I was 12, and he took me to a Presbyterian church on a weekly basis. Now, it was probably the combination of church with him and also the discipline that sometimes a father brings that a mother doesn't necessarily bring, where I just recognized that I'm happier in life, I'm doing better in school, I'm doing better in sports, and I really like this relationship that I have with God, and I want to continue to own it more and more. And there's kind of a change that happens in you as a teen where you're able to own a little bit more of your decisions, be a bit more of your own person. And then when I went back to live with my mom and then married to my stepdad, they were exploring different churches. So we went to an Episcopal church. I was baptized there, but I was still kind of questioning, is this the right church to go to? And I think I asked that Episcopal priest that, and he just kind of gave an answer of, you can do Lutheran or this or that. And it just seemed odd. But then by the grace of God, well, I guess not. I didn't do the best in freshman year of high school, public school. And my mom was then found work in special needs working with the Catholic diocese and was able to get me into a Catholic school for cheaper. So I went to St. John's College High School in DC. I told my mom I will only go to a Catholic school if it has a junior ROTC program. So kind of military preparation kind of thing, because that was of my interest at the time. And she found one that did. And a couple of things struck me. There was an amazing religion teacher, JP Winchester, and he just taught the faith in a very clear and good manner that was attractive to me as a 15-year-old. And being in JROTC, we wore dog tags. And I was kind of questioning, well, you're supposed to put your religion in your dog tags. What am I? Am I, some people are saying Catholic, Christian, Protestant, and just I'm doing this kind of questioning. And I remember talking to my grandma, who's just a lifelong Catholic, but, unfortunately felt kind of estranged because she was divorced. But she told me that the Catholic Church is the oldest church, and I thought that was something cool. And then I was close enough to a Catholic church that I was able to walk to Mass on Sundays. So started going to Mass, and even though the Episcopal and the Catholic service, well, the Catholic Mass and the Episcopal service look very similar, I knew that there was something there spiritually that just had not been at any of the other services I had gone to. And you could equate it to being like having a electric cord. You can plug the cord in the outlet and it has electricity going through it. And you can unplug the cord and it has no electricity going through it. And even though the two seemed very similar, I just found that there was some spiritual element of the Mass of Catholicism that I had not found anywhere else. So it was not at all an intellectual conversion for me as a mere 15-year-old, but it was enough to let me know that this is the kind of church, this is the church I want to become a part of. So I went through RCIA and became Catholic and confirmed Easter of my sophomore year of high school, 2003.
How did your mother, especially because she's the one that actually took you to the Catholic church, to the Catholic school, how did your mother reacted to that decision that you were making?
So what's interesting is my mom was raised Catholic, and I think some of the struggles of what she saw as a child with her parents being divorced, she actually, as a teen, was having trouble, I think, finding Christ or really being fulfilled where she was living with going to the Catholic Church. So she actually started going to an evangelical church when she was a teen. and kind of continued that, but didn't really come back to the faith. So my mom, she was pretty accepting of me entering that way. It was a little bit difficult for my dad, and he's my dad. I love him so much. He's amazing. He's actually a Protestant pastor currently.
Wow.
And
Wow.
the same time I was starting Catholic seminary, he was actually starting Protestant seminary, which was
Wow.
kind of interesting. So we certainly have some interesting conversations when we do have them, but I respect, the faith that I believe he has, that I believe some Protestants have, and admire kind of his convictions. And, what we can both say is that I believe A, he believes B, where the two are mutually exclusive, at least one of us is wrong. And that's something that relativism these days misses. So it's, but praise God, I just got to do what I think is true.
Wow. That's so crazy. Yo, so let me answer this question, and I hope you answer. What is the biggest like no for your dad about the faith? Or is it maybe just a, like entire, but like is there like a one main situation, or you never necessarily talk to him about this is a true faith, you should come to the church? Or is it more about like, hey, I'm here to answer you whatever you may ask or whatever? How's that?
So I think that it boils down to a lot of things, but he believes what he believes because he thinks what he believes is true. And I believe in the Catholic faith because I believe the Catholic faith to be true. And we both affirm that sacred scripture or the Bible is God's inspired word, but we are disagreeing on the manners of interpretation of it. And he thinks that the Catholic interpretation of it is incorrect on many ways. And he thinks that there are certain things that Catholics believe and practice that are not contained in scripture. And we can have those conversations sometimes. Oftentimes it's tricky because if you're using scripture and the other person is using scripture, you can have those conversations for a bit, but you have to kind of, you have to ultimately kind of show that, look, it's what is more consistent with like a entire scriptural biblical basis. And it's kind of tough when you have that system, you believed it for so long. That's why I think the church fathers are very helpful. I think just prayer, the liturgical experience is extremely powerful. But if you're kind of like think historically honest, if you're looking at the patristic teaching, if you are looking at scripture really consistently, and I think like Scott Hahn, Patrick, well, not Pat McGirt because he was already Catholic, but folks like Scott Hahn, John Bergsma, they were able to more of just sort of from the scriptural perspective have that proper interpretation without maybe using all those the resources, although they definitely look into them. But it's just a tough thing, and we have to have that appreciation that God gave me the grace. I'm so glad to be Catholic. I don't know why the other person doesn't have the grace. I'm not necessarily going to judge them for that. We do believe that God gives the prevenient grace or the ability for every man to be saved, which is through his Catholic Church. There's modes of being within the church without kind of understanding it, that you are in it. But I think that's just kind of, going around a lot, but that's what it boils down to, is we both think that it's different interpretations of scripture.
Got it. No, yeah, that's a little bit what you mentioned there about Askahan and whatnot. Also, I bring in like this good friend of mine who was a Protestant pastor for like 20 years, and he actually converted. His name is Keith Nestor. I don't know if you ever seen him anywhere on Instagram or YouTube. Keith Nestor, one of his biggest issue was that when he was sitting down with the rest of the pastors, he would come into one of the verses and was like, okay, this is what I think this means. And then each different pastor most likely was having a different meaning or interpretation of what that same scripture. And then he was like, so who's right? So he went into that predicament, like, who the heck says who's right now? So that's what really bugged him in, and like really bugged him. And he was like, okay, what am I doing? So that's he actually ended up, a long story. It's a huge story into short, but looking into the fathers, right? And then the fathers obviously leading into the Catholic faith, then he converted and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, again, I wanted to ask that because that's an interesting relationship to have. I necessarily don't really know somebody in a person or know ever actually interview anybody that had kind of like the father being a Protestant and the son being a Catholic. I never had that. So that's what I wanted to ask to find out kind of like, how's that working out and how does that look like? So, thank you for answering that. Now, what is the biggest thing why you love to be a Catholic?
I mean, it gives you so much meaning and purpose. And what is the purpose kind of if you don't understand that God exists, if you don't understand the truth, I mean, the transcendentals, the ultimate things that you're going through for are the good, the true, and the beautiful. And the Catholic faith puts you in touch with God under those auspices of the good, the true, and the beautiful in a better way than anything else can. And our minds are made to know truth. And when you can really contemplate and understand some of the truths of Scripture, the truths of theology, of how it kind of all makes sense, your mind elates to it. You are just elated and happy and fulfilled. And when you know you are trying to pursue goodness, for which you were made, then that gives you so much goodness and fulfillment as well. And then the beauty of it, the beauty of the liturgy, the beauty of the art, the amazingness that this isn't just something that you have, that you are on the foot of giants, or you're on the shoulders of giants, and you are just receiving this amazing tradition coming up. So it gives you that kind of deep, personal, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. And you can really break it down into so many different facets, like this question, theologically. I just got my master's in systematic theology, and I absolutely love how the theology works together. I love that we have the understanding that God's eternal law works out through divine revelation and also works out through the natural law, such that philosophy can help strengthen our understanding of the faith, but the faith can bring us certain things that we can't reach by human reason.
Mhm.
I love the sacraments, that we are made as spiritual and physical creatures, that we are a spirit body composite. And just as we are that kind of creature, God uses those means. He uses the sacraments, which are visible signs of invisible grace, in order to communicate his love and his goodness and healing power, his sanctifying grace. Sanctifying grace is a sharing in the divine life of God. And he gives us that sharing so that we can be transformed and change. And we have that tangible, touching thing to help us along the way with the sacraments. That's kind of unlike maybe a just faith alone, or faith once, or once saved, always saved kind of thing. There is this journeying that God allows us to be a part of his salvation history. And I think that Scott Hahn has given the example of, you can imagine an amazing and majestic king, but then in kind of like an empty palace, or you can have that majestic king, but he's surrounded by just a heavenly court of saints and angels and others that are also doing his will. Or the other example of, like, a general is amazing. And if a general can defeat an entire army on his own, that's something. But if he can command all of his troops to help carry out that mission, that uses a lot of kind of command, control, difficulty. And that's just a beautiful thing, that yes, our salvation is extremely important to God, but he allows us to have that kind of participation in it. So there's just so many beautiful aspects of being a Catholic that I love. And the prayer piece, let me just get into that a little bit. So I've been on a number of different retreats, and one of the beautiful things about being in the seminary is, one, doing the prayer to discern, to get in there, and then the silent retreats you have while you're in the seminary. And then even afterwards, I've gone on an Ignatian retreat, been on other men's retreats. But for the Ignatian retreat, which was probably the most powerful one I've been on in July of 2023, when I left the military, you're just able to really commune with God and have such a deep, intimate, personal relationship with him. And that St. Ignatius starts his retreat with the first principle and foundation, which is that man was made to praise, reverence, and serve God, and by this means to save his soul. And for this reason, all created things need to be used for that end, and that we need to have a holy indifference because of that. We should neither desire riches or poverty, fame or infamy, health or sickness, long life, short life, but in all things subject that to God's end for us, which is that praise, reverence, and serve him. So there's so many spiritual sources that I remember as a Protestant, you didn't necessarily have that kind of prayer. Long form prayer would just be kind of talking over each other for a lot, and a lot of just kind of intentions and a lot of music, but you can just be silent and you can rest in the Lord through mental prayer. And there's so many beautiful aspects of our faith.
Man, that was a huge thing what you said there. And to be honest, I remember, I would just tell you these few things. When I was serving in a retreat, I was talking to this priest. I was just telling him, and this was like back 2019, actually, January 2019. Oh, to January 2020. So 2 months before the shutdown. And I was telling this priest, like, how beautiful our faith is. And by this time, I'm like, getting really prepping to, like, going deep into theology. And I was just telling him, like, I'm probably gonna die. Who knows? You know, who whenever I die, I'm sure I'm not even gonna get the like not even to middle ground of what the faith is and all the saints teachings and all the beautiful things that the church offers to us. And it's just so beautiful that it makes my soul rejoice. So thank you for sharing that. That was pretty deep and very beautiful, and I'm sure a lot of people will connect as well with what everything you said there. And a couple of questions about seminary. What was the things you loved the most about being in the seminary? And what was the things you liked the less? Like you really dislike that?
So what I loved about seminary was kind of the entire life, and that you were growing closer to God, period. And you did it through studying Him. You studied philosophy, theology, but there's four pillars to seminary formation. You have the human, the intellectual, the pastoral, and oh gosh, what am I thinking of? Human, academic, spiritual, and pastoral, right? So with human formation, you're just becoming a better human. You're getting up on time. You're doing, I don't know, I kind of had that with ROTC and military stuff, but spiritually, you're praying, academically, you're learning, pastorally, you're serving the poor or other people. And you have all of this, and you're just growing closer to God, and you're doing it in an amazing fraternity of men who believe the truths of the Catholic faith and are trying to live it out to its fullness through giving themselves completely, giving up spouse, family to serve Him as a priest. And just that ability to pray now and to understand His will and to carry that spirituality out. I mean, I feel extremely blessed to have had that and have these experiences to really strengthen my relationship with Him in order to help me make these difficult decisions with regards to the COVID shot and the other challenges that I've had in life and other decision makings that I have. So it's really just growing closer to God is that biggest thing. It's something that everyone can have that capability of doing wherever they are in life. The seminary is definitely a very special place for it because you are setting yourself aside to potentially be a priest and give yourself to the church. But that is probably the best thing. And kind of the thing that was frustrating to me was I was a seminary in Washington, D.C., and with the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., and I kind of sensed the politics a little bit the first couple of years, and that was a little difficult. And I'm a convert. I don't know what I don't know. And it seemed a little odd that bringing up that I was a traditional Catholic or that I liked the Latin Mass. I just was curious about it. Obviously, I was going to say the Novus Ordo, the English Mass, and I still go, but to kind of feel as though there was a little bit of tension there. And then there were just some seminary programs that I thought were a little goofy. There's one summer program I went to, and having gone on a real Ignatian retreat and then before going on their 8-day silent retreat, I just think it's apples and oranges and that kind of little goofiness. And I remember just hearing that, oh, it could be worse. Well, I don't accept it could be worse. I think that's a really piss poor excuse for how you do anything, especially if you are the Catholic Church that has the fullness of truth and the fullness of salvation. So there was definitely some inoculation to politics that happened to me. And I think that's helped me in navigating politics now. If you're able to see that the institution that God made in order to bring the truth and His salvation to other people is maybe one of the most corrupt and political institutions that there actually are in the world, not specifically the church as God protects it, but a lot of the people within it, then it can help you navigate every other, politics is everywhere, but especially in the church, especially in politics, but then in whatever job you are in. So that's the most frustrating thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Without even knowing that story, I knew that was going to be the component because that's a component that I always hear from good friends of mine that being in the seminary, those are still in the seminary. So I just said, that's a fact.
I didn't see it. No, I didn't see it
Right.
at Mount St. Mary's at all. I love Mount St. Mary's. Now, I love both my seminaries. I love John Paul II. I love Mount St. Mary's. But at Mount St. Mary's, you had kind of a different component. And, I kind of joke that Washington, D.C. sends their seminarians to different places. Rome is where kind of the more political folks go. Theological college, a little bit more liberal, older. But then the Mount is where the misfit toys went. So I was sent with the misfit toys. But it was an amazing experience. And I can't be more grateful that I went there.
I'm so glad you were able to be led by God through this process. And, after 4 years, right, you just saying that was not your calling, right?
That is
Got it.
correct. Yeah. Yep.
Got it. Was that difficult though? Like, was it difficult for you to kind of discern out of that, or you
Very,
feel like
yeah.
free?
So it was a difficult decision to come to. And I think, I don't know, I don't know why God has given me these kind of difficult decisions of like entering seminary, leaving seminary. Do I get the shot? Do I not get the shot? Just a lot of these different discernment has been a very big piece of my life. And when I was in the seminary within the first semester, I thought that I was for sure going to get ordained. We had a seminarian who unfortunately died from some health issues within
Wow.
my first semester, and I just found his funeral so powerful, and the idea of bringing God to people and people to God, that I just kind of felt the conviction that I can freely say I'm going to be a priest. Now, going into my second theology year, which was my fourth year, I asked a priest for advice, and he said if I had not yet made a presumption of priestly permanence or that kind of permanent commitment in my mind that I would get ordained unless God said otherwise, that I should do so soon. And having kind of prayed and understood some of the movements of the Spirit, I knew that there was a spiritual unrest that was happening. And I talked to my spiritual director, and he said I should be able to make a decision by Christmas to either stay in or take a pastoral year. So I was very blessed that I'm sure you've heard of Exodus 90,
Yeah.
but the founder of Exodus 90, Father Brian Doerr, he was my formation advisor, and I told him the struggles I was
Wow.
having about staying in the seminary, and he recommended that I do Exodus 90. And although I've tried it a few times, I have to admit the only time I've really done it is when I was at the seminary and with Father Brian Doerr, him being the spiritual leader of it, and it was just an amazing experience where I knew I was growing closer to Christ. Wasn't exactly sure what he had in store for me. However, there were a lot of different themes happening. And I remember Cardinal Wuerl, the bishop at the time, giving a talk saying to guys discerning, to consider the priesthood. And for seminarians, he turned to us and said, if you guys are ever not sure if you're supposed to be a priest, you can take some time, you can step out. If God wants you, he'll call you back. We had another seminarian who said that humans are made to make decisions, that he was dating a girl and wasn't sure whether to marry her or not, but he was also thinking about the priesthood. So he had just to weigh the pros and the cons and to trust God. If he was stagnant, God couldn't have spoken to him. So he made the decision to get engaged. Well, after he got engaged, it didn't sit quite right. So he stepped out of he broke off the engagement, and now he's a priest. So this was kind of happening. And then I ended up not being sure and thinking I need to make a decision. So during one mass, that was the candidacy mass for the class ahead of me, I decided that, you know what, I think that the way that my gifts and things of that nature are working out, I think I should get ordained. I think I should be a priest. I try to make the decision, make that commitment, just dryness. It felt forced. I told my spiritual director it felt forced. And he said, why don't you consider either taking a break, a pastoral year, or stepping out? And I just explained why stepping out would show that I trust God more, that if he wants me, he'll call me back, that I would be a better priest should I be called back, that I would have to serve the army for 4 years, that I didn't think it was something that had to do with more time will let me know God's will. So I stepped out of seminary, and I was very blessed that on Easter Monday, I found out what my army job was going to be, which was active duty infantry officer, which to me conveyed that God loves me, but he wants to very much challenge me.
Wow, man, that's a beautiful story, and wow, that's crazy. Yeah, actually, the guy that came up with the SLS 90, you were one of his disciples. Let's call it that way. I remember when I did SLS 90 for the first time. I think it was 2019 actually, and when I went into, I'm like, actually, read about it, what were the regimen and all that. I'm like, what is this? But I enjoyed it. That was one of my best experience, and there are a lot of practices and asceticisms that I still keep, which are good
Good.
to the soul and to in us as men, to our body as well. And wow, that's so cool to really get to know your story, your conversion story, everything that happened through seminary, and also through what happened to you in the services and how it ended up. Now, how were you like confronted about you taking the batch or not taking the batch? How did that develop? How did that go?
Yeah. So I arrived at 7th Special Forces Group in June of 2020, and I took a team in September of 2020. And then we all knew that the COVID shot was coming out. It was being developed, and it was going to be released sometime in January, February. And just trusting my men, talking to them, being in a very open, communicative relationship with them. And we're all supposed to be, Special Forces Green Berets, we are selected to be critical thinkers. We don't necessarily just say yes or no to everything. We don't necessarily do everything the way that we're told. sometimes we may ask, is this something that has to happen? Why do we even do this? But just within my unit, I knew that I knew that shots used fetal cells. So for me, that was at least remote material cooperation. And as Catholics, the way we understand that is that there's formal cooperation and then there's material cooperation. And with material cooperation, if it's proximate, you really shouldn't have anything to do with it. If it's remote, depending on how severe the thing is, you might be able to excuse it. It's not a sin. So my understanding was it's remote. I shouldn't get it at least until it's mandatory, until my job is actually on the line for this thing. And I was also aware of some of the side effects health-wise. And that's something that was being reported through some alternative media sources and was available for anyone who wanted an alternative source. So
Yep.
I just told my guys that as their captain, I would neither punish or reward them based on whether they got the shot. Because of that, I had the least vaccinated Special Forces detachment in probably all of Special Forces. My guys just didn't want to get it. They just wanted to use their freedom of choice, their medical freedom, to at least wait until the mandate came out because they were worried they were going to get medically screwed up. So at first, it kind of was noticed that my team was the least vaccinated one. My team sergeant started getting harassed by the company sergeant major. And by that, I mean, brought into the office for like 2-3 times a week for like an hour at a time, harassed about it, asked questions about it. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? That happened to me on one occasion. I went into the company office and was talking to this soldier, this operations sergeant, and he's like, "Hey, if you guys get the shot, you can probably get this cool mission." And I wanted to be as coy as I could be, not confrontational. Said, I don't know if I can get everybody to get the shot at the time. Then the sergeant major, yells at me from the office and continues to just yell at me or just have this conversation for a long period of time where he's saying, you're screwing your career up. You're never going to recover from this. Your reputation is destroyed. You should look for work outside the army. Oh, you're not worried about yourself. Well, I'm going to punish your men for this. If you guys lose a mission, I'm going to kick them out of the company. I'm going to take them off of the team. I'm going to send them to the schoolhouse to unwanted positions. This isn't a threat, but this is a promise. So I wrote all of this, and I continue to say that you can either punish or reward us for this, that it's not mandatory yet, and wrote everything down that he said to me for memorandum of record for later on. And, had a conversation with my company commander a little bit later, and he asked why I wasn't getting it. I told him, that the vaccine adverse events reporting system, theirs reports that there were already a few thousand deaths associated with this.
Mhm.
And he's just like, yeah, but it seemed as though he wasn't really listening or didn't quite, process that. So the real pressure came when we were doing military free fall. So we were basically skydiving for 2 weeks in Arizona. And we were in our second week and we were doing nighttime jumps with oxygen and equipment. And I was just stressed out, so stressed out because I wasn't having the cleanest exits. It's a lot of, free fall jumps. And you're definitely nervous when you're up there doing that. It's a huge adrenaline drop. So you just dump your adrenaline when you jump out like that. That's why a lot of guys have high cortisol, things of that nature. But that week, First Special Forces Command said that it was a requirement that you have the shot to deploy. And we were supposed to go to a Central American country that didn't require the shot. However, with this new policy, we would not be allowed to deploy if we didn't get the shot. So I was then asked by my company commander, and I talked to my guys, "Hey, John, I know that you and your team don't want the shot. However, it's now a requirement. So what is it going to be? Are you going to get the shot, or are we going to take the mission from you?" And I told him, "Well, sir, I've talked to my men. Only one wants to get the shot. So you're going to have to take the mission." And then I follow up with, "Unless you're willing to accept natural immunity." And I had taken an antibody test by the time. Other guys have had COVID, but he said, what shocked me is he said that they weren't willing to accept that risk. The risk they were accepting is that we were jumping out of planes at nighttime with oxygen and equipment. They weren't willing to send us to a Central American country that didn't have a COVID mandate because of the fear that one of us contracts it and then we spread it or something of that nature. So that was kind of the original sort of punch into it. And that was followed up with some unwanted training events. The mandate actually coming out, then all of us getting counseled for it. So I put my religious exemption in. I did say I'm not going to get it. So said no, was counseled for that, then put my religious exemption in. I confronted the medical doctors at our unit because I told them that I think this order is unlawful. There is no FDA approved shot that's being offered to us. And that is a requirement in order to mandate this, and asked about medical immunity or medical exemption because you should be able to get a medical exemption for anything you've already contracted. the science up until that time was if you already had a disease, you have the antibodies for it, and those antibodies work better than any
But
human-made vaccination. However, they weren't accepting that, and anyone on my team who didn't get the shot by the end of the week of the counseling, they were going to get a general officer memorandum of reprimand. And all the leadership was lined up there, including the chaplain, doctor, lawyer, medic to give them the shot. So you either left with a general officer memorandum of reprimand, which really ruins your career, or the shot. And that's ultimately what happened in my team. Is the other guys ended up getting the vaccine. I didn't get it, so lost out on a lot of career opportunities after that.
man, that's crazy because I don't get it. Like, listen to your story and everything that you went through. It doesn't make any sense. Like the logic about it. Is it truly about being like healthy and safe from death because of COVID, or is it about more a political statement because it doesn't make any sense? What what were the things that you kind of like? Okay, I guess this is why they're pushing this on us. Do you thought it was more about truly caring for you, or more about like a political statement?
I thought it was 1,000% political the entire time, that we ignored our own laws, our own rules, our own military policies, and we ignored science, common sense science, not the science that's coming from Fauci or the CDC or from Biden and Harris, who have a political agenda in everything they do, or from our top generals, but the basic science, the basic common sense that we are young, fit, healthy men in the most elite profession, one of the most elite professions the military has to offer. And we've all pretty much had COVID and been exposed to COVID. We have the natural immunity. Even if we didn't have the natural immunity, we have a 99.99% chance of surviving these diseases. And many of us chose to serve in order to preserve those freedoms, which we care so much about, such as the freedom of religion. And these conscience rights, these religious rights, they're being violated against us. And that our leadership, although our leadership did want us to comply, and I don't blame my leadership as much as I do those top people who forced this on us, that they were just going along with it, not really questioning it as much as they should have, or pushing back as much as they should have. And that I think that there were a lot of special interests and powerful groups that used this crisis for their best interests. So I think that the drug companies ended up making the shots in order to make a lot of money. I think that for the same reason, they didn't allow for other alternative medicines that were proven to potentially be safe, or that they were pushing some other harmful medicines, such as remdesivir, such as putting people on ventilators. So I think that there were a lot of these special groups, and the Democrat Party and liberal flag officers seeing that this is a way to change the ideology of the military, purge conservatives, purge Christians, critical thinkers, that they use this as a weapon in order to get rid of conservatives, in order to shape the military to fit their own worldview.
That's so crazy because I don't know, but I like to think that the majority of the good men out there who are brave either are liberal or most are conservative. I don't really know many. I say liberal in the way that they're not radical left. I'm saying like in the middle, and like in the middle, like where they just want to do their own thing and they don't want the government overseeing them. Whereas the left is we want the government, and they're more feminine according to what I've seen, and also taught to with people like that. So I don't get how that was gonna be convenient to the country whatsoever. I think this is just ridiculous. They just care about money. They just care about the political statement, and that's it. Like, I don't really think they have any good intentions towards the country, neither those who are serving, such as you were. So that's ridiculous. Now that we're, went into the political arena, I want to start with this crazy statement that you once told me when we actually met about a week and a half ago. And you told me, hey, Edwin, can you believe there's people out there who are pushing this idea of writing in the ballot Jesus Christ as the candidate? And I say, you're kidding me. It's like, no, for real. Like, there's a huge movement. I'm like, that's unbelievable. And the one thing I told you, and that was all I said at that moment, was like, that's not virtuous. Like, that's just ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. It's just bananas. So tell me about this idea. If you know who came up with it or what they're promoting, what's their purpose, and just tell us how crazy that is.
Sure. And I wasn't expecting this to come up, but I've seen it through some circles, both Catholic and Protestant circles, and I've seen some traditional Catholics who have pushed this idea. I've seen some Protestant Christians, more conservative bent, like very conservative bent, pushing this idea. And the kind of idea or the premise is that both of the candidates, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, are evil, and that the policies that they push are evil. And this is a more recent kind of thing with Trump because Trump in 2016 ran on a very pro-life message. Now, he's changed his kind of messaging, and he's wanting to leave it to a state's issue. So he is the one who overturned Roe v. Wade. He put the judges in that were able to overturn it. He instated like 3 Supreme Court justices. It's pretty incredible, even if that was the only thing he did in his presidency.
I believe 2 of them were
pretty
Catholic, actually.
Yeah. You're right, they are. But now, as he's campaigning right now, he has kind of talked back his pro-life stance. He's saying that he wants it to be a state's issue. When he was asked about Amendment 4, he wasn't clear at first. He later corrected and said he's going to be voting against Amendment 4, which is the Florida radical abortion amendment, which I've been door knocking against, speaking out against. He also says that he wants to promote families and he wants to use IVF to do it. And as Catholics, we are against IVF. We understand that the procreative act, I mean, children are only to be conceived in the procreative act, you know,
In the
and
natural
that's
way.
the natural way. And that even for Protestants who don't necessarily have that understanding, that every IVF, usually that will discard maybe 10 babies. So every baby that's procreated, maybe it's about 10 that are either left cryogenically frozen for eternity, Han Solo frozen, or just discarded and trashed. And because we believe that life begins at conception, that is the sad reality. Now, Trump pushed this stuff, and which, you know, we should speak about our moral positions on it and our disagreement with it. And I will say, you know, I am a Catholic. I will be voting for Donald Trump, but I am pro-life and I want to promote a pro-life message. And I want to let Trump know that I am supporting him. However, I want to encourage him to take as pro-life as a stance as he can. And I want to do that by trying to bring other Catholics, other Protestant Christians into that circle. So with this kind of thinking that both Kamala and Trump are both as pro-death, as pro-abortion as each other, they don't see that there's a viable option. And they're kind of making the comparison that you are voting between both Stalin and Hitler, that it's kind of a choice between these two. And because life is, you know, the most important issue, and in Catholic social doctrine, we have the understanding that first and foremost, the understanding is that life is sacred and it should be preserved. Second is to preserve the common good. That's the good that's common to all, that everybody has access to, that allows for human flourishing. Then there is subsidiarity, which is the understanding that you do whatever is necessary at the lowest level. Every decision, if you can handle it at the individual level, family level, town, city, state, you do it at the lowest level. And then solidarity, that we try to work together and understand the poor and the needs of the poor, not at our own expense, but to the extent that we're able to help. So understanding that first principle of the life issue is not, it's not perfect on either side right now. And that's true. Totally true. I would love it if we had politicians that were only for protection of life from conception. But that being the case, seeing that, they think that it would be more virtuous to write in Jesus Christ as king or Jesus Christ on the ballot for president, thinking that we have 2 immoral options. And I think that's a little bit radical because, well, Jesus Christ isn't going to be our president. We're going to have to choose between Trump and Kamala. One of those 2 is going to be the president when it comes to 2025, January 21st to 2025. And I think it's very clear when you can compare both policies, even if you're just comparing it on the policies of life issue, that Trump is the much better option. Trump wants to keep the life issue to a state's issue. So what I recommend for a lot of these Catholics or Protestant Christians who are trying to push voting for Christ as king, I would say put your effort into fighting these states amendment issues. The fight is now at the state level. Get out and turn out Catholics, Protestant Christians to vote solidly at the ballot. I think there's something like 30 million Christians that aren't going to vote. I don't know if that's counting Catholics or just Protestants, but
No, that's not counting Catholics.
That is insane. That is a huge number. And if those
Catholics
were
are 70 million voters, available voters are 70 million Catholics available voters.
Yeah. So we have so much sway if we just get out and vote. And I think it's maybe 40% of the population that votes in general elections, maybe that's even generous. And we might think that the process is rigged. We might think that it's not clear. But that's the way it takes you. I mean, you have the cost benefit, and the cost is 10 minutes of your time to register, maybe half hour standing in line, 5 minutes standing in line if you vote early, which everybody can do right now, or 5 minutes if you applied for an absentee ballot and you just send it in. So you can do all of these things. So where I think that this is, so I mean, I think you just compare the two policies. Like let's compare the candidates really fast. So Trump has it as a state's issue. He's saying IVF. He was actually recently asked by Raymond Arroyo, who said that, hey, there's some Catholics who have problems with this IVF thing. And he's like, okay, well, I would consider religious exemption for that. On the other hand, you have Kamala, who thinks that abortion should be without limit, federally funded, and that doctors shouldn't have any religious exemption. She was asked about it, and she said something as fundamental as a woman's right for abortion should not be infringed upon. So she sees this as our Declaration of Independence shall not infringe upon life, liberty, and happiness. Like, she holds abortion to that highest extent. And the Democrat Party stands for not only these death issues, but and funding for it, but they also think that your kids should get transed. They think that the government should teach your kids instead of you having your freedom to protect religion. I mean, Trump would be for freedom of religion, and he's pushed out a lot of different Catholic content lately. And that's not even getting into the economy, the border, just the existential saving of our country. And if we look into how government censorship is going with regards to social media companies and the targeting of conservatives by the FBI, by the IRS, which is expanded with 80,000 more agents, they're trying to, I mean, really, this is Marxism, this is communism, and they're trying to drive conservatives out of just normal society. They're making it harder for us to live our lives. They're making it so that we have to not only be okay with how they live, but having to affirm it, having to change our lives, taxing us out of oblivion, bringing in illegals to permanently change the voting bloc within the United States, the demographics of it, and driving religion out of schools, driving God out of this nation, and just driving normal moral values. So there is not even a comparison between Trump and Kamala. So within Catholic theology, and Father Ripperger talked about it. I think Father Nix affirmed this too, that they're not looking for a saint. They're looking to preserve the common good, and the common good will be much better preserved if Trump is president. We saw 2016 to 2020 was better times than 2020 to 2024. I know that if Trump were president right now, I would still have my job. I'd currently I would have finished a master's in philosophy and be teaching philosophy and ethics at West Point. That's what I would be doing were it not for the Biden presidency pushing this COVID mandate. So I think that what I can appreciate is that they are trying to take their conscience seriously, and we need to take our conscience seriously. Voting is a moral choice. But Catholic theology, Catholic moral theology, and especially with regards to voting, you have an obligation to vote. That's one thing. And you are supposed to preserve the common good. And we have this, it's just based on love your neighbor as yourself. You voting is you loving your neighbor. You are loving yourself by preserving the common good, your family, then your friends, your country, and the common good will be much more. And you are voting for the good to be attained under a Trump presidency. It's just like the principle of double effect, where in a principle of double effect, you have something that you can do that is a morally neutral or good act, and there's going to be some negative fallout of it, but you're doing it for the good to be attained. The good to be attained is greater than the evil that incurs. And when you're voting for Trump, you're voting for like illegal immigration, stopping illegal immigration, protecting cities, protecting towns, a stronger economy where you can actually feed your family. You're voting for religious freedom. You're voting to stop censorship, to allow for yourself to be able to worship, to maintain this country where you can actually live without being targeted by government agencies. And you are voting against all the negative aspects about Kamala. So I've heard people say you're voting for the lesser of two evils. Well, you're voting for the greater good. And I think that you, all in all, get much greater policies under Trump. So I think it's kind of wrong to say it's just the lesser of two evils. I think that Trump's great, and I really appreciate it. And, I think you're also holding Tim to a standard that your bishops aren't even being held to right now. That your bishop,
I remember that.
right? They're not even clear enough about it. Like, look at how many letters and things they put out about immigration, and you need to save the dreamers and things of that nature, where if you want to talk about it or have an opinion on it, that's okay, but you need to put it in the context of what are the non-negotiable Catholic teachings. And we would have never gotten to this position where the bishop's stronger with Catholic politicians. So, I mean, Catholic bishops should have not excommunicated, but kept Biden from receiving communion under Canon 915. Canon 915 saying that if you are in grave manifest sin, you are not to be permitted to receive communion. And that's because it causes scandal, where others who see him receiving communion think that his views are okay. So you should have kept Pelosi, Biden. I don't know if Walls is Catholic, but just all these people from receiving.
He's Catholic. He said that.
Absolutely insane, right?
Crazy.
So I just think that you are totally wasting your vote if you vote for Jesus. You can't necessarily understand a person's intent, but the fervor with which some of these folks try to preach that you should vote Jesus, I think should be better spent in fervor in trying to fight these abortion amendments and in just doing some education on Catholic moral teaching. Now, if you don't accept the Catholic moral teaching, then you're not necessarily Catholic, because that's what you have to do. So if you're doing it from a place where you prayed about it and got to it, you got to accept your conscience. But that's what we accuse Protestants of doing, is kind of thinking through things themselves, making that decision. But and there is a place in Catholic moral theology where if you truly do look through it and you weigh it, and for some reason that's where your mind comes to, you can do it. But I just don't see how that's practical. Where faith and practicality meet, I just don't see how it's anything other than voting for Trump.
Here's what I got to say about everyone out there, Catholic and Christian, Protestant, who are voting for Jesus Christ written in the ballot. You are acting disingenuous. That's just ridiculous. Jesus doesn't want you to do that because he cannot be the president. It's just a fact. Come to reality. The fact is that you're wasting your vote, number one. Number two, you're actually giving power to the worst person ever that could go for president, which is Kamala Harris, plus adding up the VP, who's the most radical governor out there that comes into that thing that you care about, which is abortion, right? If you care so much abortion, look into what they're promoting. And when you're putting Jesus Christ into it, that's exactly what you're doing, supporting them. By the way, we know you're trying to do that, but that's just what's going to transpire through the ballots, all right? So be honest about it. Be honest. Think about the truth. And to Catholics out there who I believe you said they're mostly conservative and mostly traditional, I'm sure you love Pope Benedict XVI. When he was Ratzinger, when he was, not a pope yet, he came out and said, when it comes to political issues, you always got to choose the lesser of the two evils. And I get it, we actually Trump, because it's so, there is no gray area between these two when it comes to the entire political arena. He's the greater good. It's true what you said. Now, if you come into abortion, right, just these two issues, he's the lesser evil because he's still pro-abortion certain things, right? Like, because, the three exceptions, that's still pro-abortion into those three exceptions. But what I'm trying to say is, based on that, which is the most important thing, at least to me too, as well, he's the lesser of the two evils. So you're morally obliged to vote for Trump if you actually care about the truth and if you actually care about the church and your faith, not putting Jesus Christ into that. That's just ridiculous. And you're doing actually a harm to the country and a harm to the pro-life movement. Just think about that way. And, I'm a very passionate guy. That's why, I'll be holding myself a little bit here. Plus, this is not my first language, so I have to speak moderately, trying to speak well and whatnot so that I can be understood. But again, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Please pray about it. And I know people done it already. I've seen a couple of pictures going through social media. God is going to talk to you real quick. It's going to tell you, you shouldn't have done that. And this thing about, vote with your conscience. Yeah, but if you're Catholic, you need to understand that the church teaches conscience needs to be formed by what the church teaches. It's not just about your own consciousness, like you are like some kind of liberal, I don't know.
That's Protestantism.
That's Protestantism. Relying on your own.
Interpreting it how you want.
Exactly. You need to go into Catholic moral teaching, which says according to Ratzinger, and that's still there and still applies to today, because after he put that there in a letter, official letter of the Catholic of the faith, nobody has reviewed that. So you ought to choose the lesser two evils, specifically on this situation about abortion. And bro, I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I got a little fired up, but it's just so ridiculous because they're harming the goodness of the pro-life movement as well. Do we have to talk
You're
to
right.
Trump and maybe explain him what's so bad about IVF? Because we don't know if he actually knows 100% about it. We don't really know. Right?
He's not Catholic. I mean, he's not Catholic, and
so
it's better to vote for. You have social media. You can vote for him, and you can say, "I just voted for Trump, but I'm pro-life. I hope that he changes this." You have the support of the pro-life movement, something of that nature. And that's
here's what I will say. For example, what's her name? She's the president and founder of Live Action. What's her name?
Lila Rose.
Lila Rose. She's a Catholic. Thank God. She actually converted as well too a while ago. I mean, a couple of years ago. And you know what? I love what she does. Because most likely she's going to end up voting for Trump because that's the lesser two evils, but she still calls them out, which is a good thing. You know, we should also be doing that. Hey, I support you, but these things are wrong and this is the reason why, right? But rather than just sit back and be like, we're just going to vote for Jesus Christ. It just doesn't work. It's not going to do any good whatsoever. It's actually going to do a harm. So please rethink that, pray about it, and take this with all love and then try it.
So last Sunday we had Christ the King. That was the feast of Christ the King last Sunday, and the reading was from John. And it's when Pilate was asking Jesus, "Are you a king?" It's like, "Are you the king of the Jews? You say so. Where's your kingdom? My kingdom is not of this world." It's not of this world. He says that. He also says, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's." And there was a moment when the Jews were trying to crown him king, and he escaped the crowds to avoid that. And there's an understanding with Catholic theology that there's a spiritual realm and a temporal realm. And just with that temporal power, it's to whoever's appointed, whoever's in that position. But we need to do what we can in order to preserve the common good to our greatest extent. Jesus Christ needs to be king of our hearts, king of our entire lives. But he works through people. That's the beauty of the Catholic faith when I was going through it, is that he uses ordinary people, bishops, priests, us, to help carry the faith, carry salvation to other people. And we need to do that through the world. And we need to do that through our ability to vote. We need to do it through supporting the strongest candidates. If you're just coming to the table right now at the general election, next time get involved sooner and support those other candidates. Like if we had much more congressmen who were pro-life, if we had local leaders, state senators, state representatives, things of that nature. So there needs to be a greater involvement in politics generally. There needs to be a changing of the culture, changing of hearts and minds. But no, you said it well, and you said it, rightly frustrated, because it is a frustrating thing. And I would hate for our country to go through 4 more years of this, which might not be recoverable because people didn't want to just, I don't know, even just close their, cover their nose and just vote for Trump. I think he's awesome. I was very blessed to meet him. I think he's a very genuine man, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah. And you know what? We've seen Trump change through time. Because he has learned a lot of things, new things that he didn't know before. Also, that you don't know how God works in someone, right? Like everybody has a different story with the Lord. We don't know where he's at right now. And honestly, there's a lot of things that he, in a way, I'm not trying to excuse him over here. Because at the end of the day, if I were him, I'd be strong about my beliefs no matter what. But I get it. There's a lot of political things that goes into, can I support this? How much more deep I can go into be 100% pro-life and then lose the votes and actually not get anything done. I mean, think about it, right? But we're not gonna get into all those details and whatnot.
Yeah.
But now bringing it here to Florida. I know you live in Pensacola, right?
I live in Destin, so very close, about an hour.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah. So up north, Florida. I live down here, South Florida, Miami, where the Latinos are. The Cubans, the Dominicans, the Colombians. That's where we at. So
you get it.
Let's talk about real quick why vote no on amendment number 3.
So amendment 3 is the marijuana amendment. And, I was actually at a press conference that Ron DeSantis had last Friday, and he addressed it and addressed a lot of those concerns. And more than actually just making marijuana available, it's more about a corporate greed and a corporate grab. And we already have medical marijuana. If you have a medical reason to get marijuana, then you're able to go and you're able to get it. And honestly, if you were just a pothead who wanted to get marijuana, you'd be able to do it. You would be able to figure out some way to get a medical marijuana card and to get marijuana. And if you're not smart enough to do that, then you're the person who doesn't need to be having access to weed. But what this amendment would do is it would make it a constitutional right in the Florida state constitution, make it an amendment where a person would be able to purchase weed at whatever stores, and it would be only through a few corporations. Now, $75 million are being given by corporations in order to fund this amendment. And it would be fiduciary irresponsibly of them to provide this money if they didn't think they were going to get it back. So they're putting this money in because they know they're going to make hundreds and millions of dollars off of marijuana in the state. And being the ones that have that access, and I think it might actually shut down a lot of these other marijuana shops because they're going to be the ones that have that capability. They're going to be making so much money off of it. Now, some of the main issues with it, other than just, they have no liability. Just like the drug companies don't have liability for negative side effects of like the COVID shot, other drugs where people get medically injured, there would be no injury from these different individuals. So if you were injured having marijuana or some child got into it and was affected by it, you couldn't sue these companies, even in potentially the delivery of marijuana from store to store. So it takes away the medical liability. It makes it that right where you have areas where people can't smoke, and that's fine. Sometimes I like to smoke, whether it's a cigar or something of that nature, but you wouldn't have that, and people would be smoking in restaurants, stores, wherever, because now that's your amendment, that's your right. And kids would be able to have much more access to it. And that's problematic. And it has negative side effects for kids. Adults, if that's something you want to do, it's something that you pretty much have that capability of figuring out on your own. And just with kids being able to do it and then be able to manufacture it to where it's more addictive and stronger, which is what these drug companies do because they're just out there to make money.
Yep.
It creates a whole lot of problems. And we've seen it being problematic in Colorado, in Oklahoma, in other states where it's been enacted, where everywhere smells like pot. Kids are getting into it. No liability for drug companies. You can't even grow your own weed. So for people, if you're a pothead and you're like, man, I want to smoke weed, it's like, bro, you can't grow your own weed if this goes through. Like, wouldn't that be the more libertarian way? So if you're a libertarian, if you're a pothead, or if you're a person who's just against weed, we're just saying no. So the DeSantis sign said, not about freedom, but about corporate greed. So just say this corporate greed, no, go vote, let your friends, family know, and use whatever message you need to, whether it's the pothead who wants to smoke it, tell them, hey, this isn't that great for you, or the person who wants to preserve their community and keep their kids from getting drugs, tell them no as well.
And I want to add this study from the PUV Med, right? Because everybody trusts science, right? Everybody trusts science. A range of acute and chronic health problems associated with cannabis use has been identified. Cannabis can frequently have negative effects in its users, which may be amplified by certain demographic and as psychosocial factors. Okay. Acute adverse effects includes hyperemesis syndrome, impaired coordination and performance, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, psychotic symptoms. Acute cannabis consumption is also associated with an increased risk of motor vehicle crashes, especially fatal collisions. Evidence indicates that frequent and prolonged use of cannabis can be detrimental to both mental and physical health. Chronic effects of cannabis use include mood disorders, exacerbation of psychotic disorders in vulnerable people, cannabis use disorders, withdrawal syndrome, neurocognitive impairments, cardiovascular and respiratory and other diseases. In general, it's just not good, all right? It's just not good. And, I love the way that you were promoting your case for, saying no to this. I want to share it because I brought everyone to read this as well alongside me. So let's read this beautiful letter from this Afro man, this song called Because I Got High. So let's read into this guy, right? Let's just believe him, right? He's just an artist. He's just expressing his, what he goes through and all that. And we love artists, right? So I was gonna clean my room until I got high. I was gonna get up and find the broom until I got high. My room, it was too messed up, and I know why, because I got high. And I can go through all of this. I don't want to waste your time, neither my time doing this. But all we need to understand, and we already know what he meant by, because he got high, he's just a mess, and he's not much of a good use to society, right? And I know this for a fact because I live for so many long time in one of the worst neighborhood or close to, and actually work there right here in Miami Gardens, and also Opaloca. I know what it's like. I know the smell. I know how people react to it. I know how people live through that. And I know the addiction component to it. Because a lot of people say, oh, it's not addictive. Yeah, right. Everybody likes to have that nice whatever. And actually, when you smoke that, there is a lot of
Yeah,
um
neurochemicals and things of that
yeah,
nature.
releasing from your
Endorphins. Yeah.
brain that is
Mhm.
addictive. All right. So family, please vote no on number 3. It's just not good to you, and it's not good for the entire society. And I don't want to be like in New York. It sucks in New York, and let alone Colorado. So yeah.
Yep.
Now, we need to finish that end with political stuff, which is very important. I know you're very active on this, which is great, and I love that. With Amendment number 4 in Florida, I know I spoke about it. I did an interview in Spanish. If you speak Spanish, please go to my other YouTube channel. I'll leave the link down on this description for you to watch and listen to this great gynecologist and OBGYN talking about the crazy stuff that this amendment is proposing, and also not proposing, but underneath is gonna come out with. So go over there and watch that interview. She goes really in depth into it. But what can you tell us, John? How can we understand this ridiculous, nonsensical amendment number 4 on the ballot of Florida?
Yeah, Amendment 4 is the abortion industry trying to get a foothold into Florida. And they're using vague language and they're not defining their terms in order to have the most extreme abortion amendment in probably just any state. And for instance, terms that they say are viable, but they don't define the point of viability. So the abortion can occur at any point in time. It says for a woman's health, and it doesn't define a woman's health, which means that it could be for a headache, a cough, or whatever. The person making that determining factor is a healthcare provider, and healthcare provider is not determined. That means that it could actually be the nurse or someone who's working at Planned Parenthood saying, oh, yeah, you're good. You have a reason. And it's also making it so that it takes away parental consent. So for any other procedure that your child gets under 18, you need parental consent for that. But for an abortion, you don't need it. Instead, they change out notification. So the example that I give is if you can imagine, if you are a father and you get a call from Planned Parenthood and Planned Parenthood says, hey, your daughter is here and she's about to get an abortion. You as the father are going to be so concerned and say, wait, what's going on? Let me get down there. Let me help. And they'll say, oh, there is nothing you can do about it. We don't need your consent. We only needed to notify you. The abortion is going to happen in 5 minutes. See ya. And that's what that would do. It would take away parental rights and it would enshrine it into Florida's constitution as a constitutional amendment. And that would make it where it would take decades and millions and millions and millions of dollars in order to overturn this. And because we are surrounded by so many red states that have very strict abortion laws, people would flock from those nations. And just all of these different problems coming up. But I think if you're pro-life, you're automatically going to be against this, and you need to try to share and get people to vote against this. If you are a person who's moderate and not sure about it, if you think there should be any exemptions for abortion whatsoever, then you should vote no against this. You can always go into the state law and you can have your state reps and your state senator vote in a certain way or come up with whatever exception, which I don't think there should be any. But with an amendment, even if you have any sense of wanting any kind of restrictions whatsoever, it would take away that capability to where you are now having, girls that are underage without their parental consent, getting abortions at 8 months pregnant, and it's paid for by taxpayers. And that's how it turns out, is that these other states that have these amendments, because it's now seen as a right on the level of free speech, that the government ends up paying for it, and we as taxpayers would pay for it. So it just is an absolute travesty, and it's the abortion industry just trying to make more money by getting a foothold here. So please pray and just go vote no. You got to vote. You can't just pray. You have to pray and vote.
Yeah, ora elabora. And it's important to know that, by the way, we get we got laws here that allows women who were RAPE, right? And also that were in through incest to actually have the abortion. It doesn't have any limit, by the way, right here in Florida. And also that's, the heartbeat, right? So that's about, 6 weeks or I believe 12
Right.
weeks. So
So
there's
yeah,
not
6 weeks.
like in Florida, in general, it's not banned yet. I hope it gets banned, but I just letting you know because they're promoting this. Obviously, always. By the way, I want to go back to I remember number 3. You know what they're saying on the Spanish YouTube commercials? They're saying, "But yes, because we're gonna be able to give more money to the teachers." They're just lying right away because in the amendment they're not specifying how they're gonna use supposedly this taxation they're gonna really
Yep.
receive from this open sale of marijuana. They're not saying what they're gonna use it in, so we really know. So most likely, like I said, they're not gonna go to officers and firefighters and teachers. Don't buy it. Also, on the other side, they saying, "Oh, this is for the woman health." Let me tell you, when it says health provider, that's your dentist, that's the person that you go to do your face and all these things and whatever. They're not saying they gotta be doctors, so that's a big issue. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that. And do you wanted to close up about these 2 amendments?
No,
For
I
real?
mean, I think that people who listen to your channel, they already know to vote no, and there are resources. So I think that vote no on 4 is the best resource, at least as far as messaging. So you can go to that website and you can look at the material that they offer and get involved that way. And I think there's a vote no on 3 as well.
Yeah,
And I have that on my social media, and I think you do as well. So
yeah.
those are ways that you can get involved, but definitely vote and have all your friends, family, other people vote as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, guys, just to finalize here, I hope by now, about an hour or something, maybe like an hour 10, I don't even know now, but very close to that. You've noticed that we got the same shirt, right, with the same logo. So that must, called out your attention, like why they're wearing the same shirts. Well, turns out that we met actually at something called the Martyrs Walk. So it's that main Catholic retreat. It's just amazing. I can't recommend it enough. So please, in March of 2025, this is going to be the next date for this retreat. You cannot miss it. If you love the Lord, if you want to live for the Lord and you want to serve the church, this is imminent to live this retreat and to come into this brotherhood that we are. Anything you would like to say to that?
Yeah, I think that it's a solid thing, and there are a lot of brotherhoods that are going on right now, but this is a Catholic brotherhood. So if you're looking for other Catholic brothers to help you in this fight, if you don't want to fight it alone, and if you maybe are stuck in a rut, you're not sure what to do, you're like, "Ah, I kind of want to get into my faith, but I'm having trouble being physically motivated, spiritually motivated, not sure where to go." It can be a good kick in the butt. It can be a good challenge physically, spiritually. So it's definitely something to consider. And I would just recommend reach out to the Martyrs Walk, ask questions, see if it's something for you. I don't think it's the only thing or the most imminent thing. Like there's a lot of things you can do to get closer to God, but it's definitely something that, you found very impactful. Others have found very impactful. So it might be what God has in store for your life in order to impact you. So would love to see you there. Would love to see you join the brotherhood if that's something that you think God is calling you to do, and then you have what it takes.
For sure. And the link below will be to the website. So you look into it and you can also, sign up for the next date. Well, friends, this has been great. I think this has been amazing talk, amazing interview, conversation, slash everything else you want to think about it. And man, any final remarks before we go into closing prayer?
That however this turns out, however elections turn out, it's for God's greater glory. And he's going to win in the end. And we need to just open ourselves to his grace to live our life for him and just trust in the Lord. So get out there, do what you can, but ultimately God's in charge. And if Kamala wins, if all these amendments fail, it just might be chastisement that's necessary for this country and for our individual selves to grow closer to him. So embrace it and know that in all things you will have everything that is necessary for your salvation and for your holiness. So just embrace it.
100%, man. And remember, God is going to continue to be the same God after this election. So don't lose hope, faith strong, and viva Cristo Rey. So we'll close with an Ave Maria, which I love to do for my channel and our community. And please pray with us, Brother John. All right, Brother John, that sounds funny.
I got you.
Anyway, all righty. En nome del Padre, se Filii e Spiriti Santi. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre. Amen.
Gloria Patri, Filio e Spiritus Sancto.
Sic ut erat principio, et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
Mater dolorosa, ora pro
nobis.
nobis. Sancte Joseph, Taro Domonum, ora
Ora
pro
pro nobis.
nobis. All right, John, thank you so much for accepting this invitation. This was a blast. I had a great time. It was very, heartwarming to listen to your entire story from many different aspects of what you've been through. And it's definitely a beautiful story that the Lord has done with your life. And I know that He's using you, and I pray that He continue to use you in any path that you take from now on, so that His kingdom can be shown through your actions and through your life. And thank you so much, brother, for accepting this. And I hope that there could be another time to discuss any other topic.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, let's do this again in Spanish next time on the other channel. But I appreciate
For sure. Vamos a hablar español, güey.
Sí, vamos. Sí, tigre.
Hey, you got it, bro. You got it. Tigre. That's right. All right, fam. Please subscribe, comment, give it a like, share this, and we'll talk the next time. Bye-bye. Bendiciones.
Bye.